Tracer is an enabling technology. We enable people to tell stories, and one of the things I was going to say, it's nice to be able to tell a positive story for once. And I was in a diamond manufacturer last week in Botswana, and I was gobsmacked by this. They were completely carbon neutral. They were processing all their black and grey water. They were growing all their vegetables for their staff on site, providing food for everybody. It was an amazing story, and no one was telling that story. So I think even just being able to share something happy would be great, and I think kind of that's what we're trying to do.
No, absolutely. So I want to just ask the panel, how do we ensure that disruptive emerging tech is inclusive, it's accessible, it's safe, and it's done responsibly before it starts to really shift mainstream and industry norms? Yeah, do you want to start us off?
I think in my industry there's little that can be done to say that we're ethical. I don't know what we could do that's unethical. But there's obviously regulation and compliance there that ensures, there's no data breaches and stuff. However, what I would say, and I know that we spoke about this before, is that there are industries where there is absolutely no policy whatsoever, right? So you've got like the metaverse, and once you put on that VR headset, the number of complaints about abuse, bullying, that there has been, and that is purely because the government is they're not in a position where they're going to look at a policy yet for it. So I do think that the onus is there on the people that are building it to ensure that these are safe environments, to ensure that these are ethical and that there are things in place. It's just insane that you've got a tick box that says, I'm over 12. I also appreciate that on the other side, it's very difficult to do verification of people who are under 12, they don't have ID or whatever. But it does mean that you need policies to be able to escalate things. It means that you need really strict rigorous complaint systems as well that properly checks things and properly kicks people off as well. These platforms, they don't kick people off. They say, okay, you're not allowed to have access to that game for I think it's like 12 hours, 24 hours on some of them, and then they're back in. And actually what they do is they put it on the people who are the ones that have complained to say, we'll just change your name so you're anonymous, and so people can get to you. There is this thing where you can put like a virtual 5 meters around you, but it's still invasive. And I think the fact that the measures that they've put in are so poor is just really bad. And I think, again, just coming back to it, it's really on us, the people who are building it, to ensure that these things are ethical.
Really well said. And obviously, with the other panelists here, we're talking about disruption and services that maybe if they are not thought about carefully can further proliferate the kind of digital poverty divide as well. We're talking about more services moving to online, more services moving to digital. That in itself can be uninclusive if the access to those services is not equal. How do you feel about what the products and services you're responsible for can do to help address those gaps?
Yeah, I think I kind of open with kind of some of what again, the mission 10 times better for banks, their customers and society as a whole. I think all of us, I'm going to put out there, none of us are on average salaries. All of us are earning good money. We're all in central London. We're all in kind of London tech leaders. By design, we're not going to be average, as in there's going to be people that earn significantly less. I think the current kind of global economic climate, whether it's inflationary pressure, we need to give methods to real customers to be able to make their money work better for them. As I referenced, one of our clients, due to significantly cheaper technology, is providing 15 times better interest rates to every customer. I would put it out there, I think they're probably giving out the most interest of any bank in the UK, regardless of balances. Secondly, they give great propositions, and there's an element of market entry. Like I'm sure I saw a few banks in here that saying, they're buying the market. I don't think it's true. I spent 10 years at Barclays prior to here, and the amount of tech cost charge I used to take was hundreds of millions of pounds in the business bank. And that wasn't adding value, it's just because it's old. And that was margin, someone had to price it, someone had to find that money from somewhere. But if you can run technology at 100th of the cost, the fundamental value exchange, I don't think banks are ever going to be making £100 billion a year. The government wouldn't allow it. But if they can get to a point where their cost to income ratios are in 20%, 15%, cost of funds drive an element of that. But if they can get down to them types of numbers, most banks in the UK are between 45, the good ones, 70, normal, and somewhere in between. If they can run a kind of a cloud native banking platform for single digit millions a year, the amount of value that goes back to every single consumer of from every background is going to be significant. So I really do believe if we can take out some of this legacy cost, which is everyone believes it's not of value, then ultimately the impact will be significant, and that's what we're seeing so far.
So we did an exercise very recently to look at ESG very broadly, and kind of came up with a score with I think it's EcoVadis, which is one of the providers out there. Oddly enough, the biggest sort of negative contributor to that was carbon emissions from data centers. So we work with all of the big banks. We have a lot of kit that has to be hosted somewhere. Most of it's in the cloud. Some of it, for legacy reasons, is in the data centers. But I would say for us, that's probably the one area that we do really kind of want to look at. If you compare data centers and cloud in terms of environmental footprint, at least the headline figures, I haven't dug too deeply yet, I must admit, but the headline figures are much better on the cloud. So I think a big thing for us is also just looking more broadly at sort of ESG topics and seeing as a business how are we contributing across lots of different aspects of environmental and social responsibility.
I think Steve has offered to, over a beer, discuss the challenge of the Scope 3 emissions with any of you. Anything you want to add, Jason?
Yeah, maybe just a small one. Look, so we're B2B, we're not in consumer space, so I think, the accessibility and so on is not something I can really speak to. I think the interesting thing for me, and it's just a bit anecdotal, but nice to do, Tracer is an enabling technology. We enable people to tell stories, and one of the things I was going to say, it's nice to be able to tell a positive story for once. And I was in a diamond manufacturer last week in Botswana, and I was gobsmacked by this. They were completely carbon neutral. They were processing all their black and grey water. They were growing all their vegetables for their staff on site, providing food for everybody. It was an amazing story, and no one was telling that story. So I think even just being able to share something happy would be great, and I think kind of that's what we're trying to do.
I absolutely agree with that. I'm just looking at we've talked a bit about funding and how to get businesses moving around disruptive and emerging technology. We know that the funding space is challenging at the moment. What do we think is the threshold for acceptable levels of work and effort towards building inclusive and diverse products from the very get-go? Obviously, every pound counts when you're trying to get something off the ground. The standards of expectation have increased monumentally. What do we think is practical and reasonable these days?
Blimey, that's a challenging one. I mean, we feel like complete, obviously diversity of inclusiveness around hiring has to be completely, that's a given. Now that's just a baseline for everything. I'm going to hand to the other experts.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that at least some functionality is scale, right? So if there are two of you who've just started a startup, probably you're going to be more focused on is your startup going to survive than how do you build a diverse and environmentally and socially inclusive culture. I think once you've kind of up and running and you've proven you've got an MVP, you're generating a bit of money, then for me, it really becomes part of that vision that we were talking about earlier. And I think certainly for us, and I think a lot of people, they want to be part of an environmentally and socially responsible organisation. So to me, that's just a natural part of growth, is to say, if we're here in the market and we're trying to grow and we're trying to attract talent, then surely this must be contributing towards it.
I think it's also really important to, if you are flawed in some way, that, be open about it and recognise it. I think calling out where you're not doing good enough is a really good starting point to know that you do need to improve, and it makes sure that you are held accountable when you have the ways and the means and resources to improve, that people are aware you intend to do something about it.